Hi everyone, good to see you here. Here we are for another one of our webinars, our European Investment Bank Institute webinars with Catholic Lisbon School of Economics. Today is our 13th webinar, and the topic is leading systemic change, a very complex topic, and we have a very good person here to talk to us about system change and system thinking. I'm going to introduce her in 1 minute. First, for all of you who don't know about the European Investment Bank Institute and its flagship initiative, the SIT, the Social Innovation Tournament, you could follow the link, which I think is going to appear on your chats, if not now, in a while, in order to know a bit more about this initiative. Let me present myself for those who don't know who I am. I've been working with Catholic Lisbon School of Economics for the last 2 years, and I teach social entrepreneurship to undergraduates and, of course, to masters in the past. I'm passionate about social entrepreneurship. I'm a social entrepreneur myself. I created my organization in 2007. And after that, I worked with Ashoka in education projects, and now I'm the CEO of Junior Achievement Portugal, which is a leading organization in education for entrepreneurship. Our guest, Silvia López Herrero, I met her because of the system change in education. It's a topic that is very close to me, and a common friend, Ivan, suggested that we talked. And when I started talking to Silvia, I thought that she would be the ideal guest to have here to talk to us about system change. Silvia, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for your invitation today.
Could you tell us a bit more about where do you come from? Where are you now? Where do you see yourself in 10 years, and where do you see the world in 10 years?
Oh, wow, all those questions already.
Yeah, I know,
Okay.
It's too much.
I come from actually the practice, so I've been working in the field of sustainable change for 20 years already. Initially, the first decade of my work is being in the working for different sorts of organizations, from consultancy companies to aid industry, to international foundations, mainly working for many years for Vina Foundation. It's a very well-known for a foundation working in Latin America and supporting social entrepreneurship and social change, sustainable change. So after spending 10 years in the practice, I realized and I learned how things were working and the need to actually invest some time to really explore more the nature and the dynamics of sustainable change, because we were importing and applying and adapting many tools and conceptual frameworks coming from the private sector, from the management schools, which are very much influenced from private sectors and the for-profit organizations. But social change is a very different business. So I quote my Ipanema life, as I said before and always, and I went to London School of Economics in London, where I took a PhD on applying complexity theory to sustainability, and in particular to the topic of how to manage and build multi-stakeholder partnerships, which coming from the practice, it was very obvious to me, and it is, I think, to most of the people nowadays, that is the key driver of systemic change. So
where are you now? What are you trying to do now with your work?
So I've been spending, my research was focused on that topic, and now the focus and the interest to bring all that theoretical and research work into the practical work. So offering to the society new understanding of seeing sustainability from a systemic perspective, and bringing that new generation of tools that we need to actually make system change possible. So, and this is going to be from Lisbon, hopefully.
Okay, good. So what is your vision of a sustainable world in 10 years, working with system change, with system thinking? How do you think the world is going to be in 10 years if all goes well?
I think actually we are moving towards, the fact that we are here today and we are talking about system change is not just casual. I think the trend is being evolving towards the point where we are understanding that we need to connect the dots. And that comes very much by the failure of the former models of work. And so we are now perceiving that actually, we're working in contexts that actually they are systems. And so I think the world in 10 years is going to be moving towards system change, definitely. It's a new area, it's a new research domain, it's a new practice, but I think we are, many people trying to make a point and a difference in that field. So hopefully more collective engagement, more collective agendas to the future.
Nice. I hope we'll get there soon.
Yeah, we will.
When you talk about system change and concepts, actually, we've been talking more and more about system change, and I think one of the problems or one of the challenges is exactly to understand what the concepts are. So we've organized this webinar in 3 parts, and the first part is going to be about understanding a bit more about the concepts, because at least from my point of view, I sometimes think that we struggle a lot to go from the macro theoretic field to the practice. I know that you just said that you came from the field, helping social entrepreneurs to have more sustainable projects, and then you did your research.
Yeah.
And the question is, okay, we now have to understand what these concepts mean to bring it back to the field.
Yes, we do.
So, starting with the first concept, which is the base of everything, system thinking. Can you tell us a bit more about what this is, after all?
Yeah, I think that, I will focus my contribution very much in the context of sustainability, which is what I can talk a bit, isn't it, about. And I think system thinking into sustainability comes to really explain that actually, as I was saying, the context where we're interacting is made out of multiple agents, which are interdependent, interconnected, and that they collectively, and that's the notion of system, these have a particular identity. So that's what we call systems, this collective entity made up of multiple parts that interact in a particular way. And of course, theoretically, there are different ways to understand systems and different types of systems, but sustainability is moving our context today of societies and moving towards behaviors of complex behaviors. And so we're talking more about complexity theory. So that's the contribution that these ideas can bring to sustainability. Is really perceive that as we are talking about climate change and we understand that the climate has a particular behavior and it is a complex system, meaning, it's a whole framework of entities interacting in a very particular way, and we can say the same for land ecosystem, marine ecosystems. So this is the same thing for societies. Societies, they are pools of entities that they have a particular frame, a particular behavior. So the way we act into this context has to be according to this nature, according to the particular dynamics that these systems actually display. And we weren't aware of that, as we weren't aware until so recently, as we weren't aware of climate change, and we were dumping things in the atmosphere and in the oceans without knowing. So I think this is a tipping point where we are today, is that actually recognizing that, okay, societies have a particular collective behavior. The question is, how does it work?
Okay, but you have a lot of theories that study systems, right? They're all part of this theory of complexity.
Yes, they are.
And they have many theories. One of the points about the difficulty of the concepts is, okay, but doesn't this depend also on the point of view of the observer? Mm-hmm. Meaning, one observer of a certain system, like bring the oceans, or the way the oceans behave as a system. One person observing the system and the behaviors in the system, including human behaviors towards the system, may have one point of view and the other one has another point of view. The thing is, when we talk about collective intelligence in order to make the whole system with more equilibrium, how do we do that in a practical point of view? Because it seems so difficult to have a common vision to so many different agents.
Yeah.
How do we, in practical terms, do that? What kind of tips could you give us to try to get that collective intelligence work?
Yeah, I think that's the transition where practically we are right now, is the perception that actually in order to solve any social problem, our own perspective on the problem is not enough. Whatever the perspective it is, either we come from the government, we represent the private sector, we represent the social sector. If we try to tackle any problem just by our own point of view will be limited. So if we really therefore assume, understand and accept that we are working in our societies, there are systems, they are all connected, they are all interdependent. So we need therefore practically to bring to the table the different parts of the problems we are trying to tackle. And I would recommend the angle to enter into this field to begin with the problem you're trying to deal with. So once you have a cause, when you have a problem on the table, look at that problem and try to map and try to bring to the discussion, the different parts of that problem. Because at the end of the day, that's what systems theory and thinking and approach tell us. So it's all interrelated, it's all collective, it's all co-responsible for. So this is the practical approach to it.
Okay, thank you. That brings me a lot to the methodology that social entrepreneurs use when they develop their projects. And being our audience, social entrepreneurs that are developing their projects, maybe it's useful to talk about this. Because I think we could go to the example of how a social entrepreneur starts developing a project to understand the difference between system thinking and system change. Why? Because what we learn in social entrepreneurship classes and the methodology we use in classes is that we should have a core problem that we analyze with deepness and understand all the causes and how they interrelate and interconnect.
Yeah.
I think this exercise that we ask, social entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs to do is actually a system thinking exercise.
Yes, it is.
Understand the various connections. But then what we struggle is the next step.
Yes.
How to move from a system thinking approach to a system change approach, and there we start feeling the limitations.
Yes, we do.
Which is, okay, we have skills on this area, we have a passion for this specific root cause, and so we're going to focus our resources and our skills on this, because I think we're going to be more effective in this. How can social entrepreneurs that act like this move towards a more system change approach?
Right. Okay, that's a big question. So, yeah, I think that we'll need to differentiate. System thinking is good, is a good holistic approach to problem, but it doesn't, as you say, necessarily mean that we're talking about system change. If we want to talk about system change, we need to, as I'm saying, acknowledge that we are dealing with social systems and that we are dealing with a collective, particular way of behaving of these social systems. So the way to move forward into the practice is to really, again, as you say, start by the core problem of it and understand the causes, doing a causality analysis. So how the causes of your problem are related. Because the moment you understand how these causes are related, you're going to start to understand what are the dynamics of the context you are dealing with.
And we do that by researching, by...
Yeah, you do a causality analysis. So practically there are tools that is called causality analysis, where you map what are the different causes, so you put your core problem at the center of the discussion and you go and explore the different elements of what are the causes related to the problem. But the most important thing is trying to understand how these causes are related.
Okay. So
and
this
what
is the first step.
That would be the first step.
Okay, and then?
Okay, and then, so as we were saying before, systemic approach to social change, how you do these exercises has to be engaging the stakeholders that are accountable for your problem. You can do this engagement or these participatory approaches more from the very beginning, which it will be the more recommended thing, meaning doing this from the diagnostic moment, which is what we're talking about right now, doing a map analysis of your problem, identifying all the causes and the relationships.
Together with them.
Together with them, or you can do this first exercise as a practitioner on your own with your team and start to map all these causes of your problem and relationship of the causes, and decide then who you need to be, who you need to invite to the table to actually build and review that map together. Okay. So that will be the diagnostic part of it. The
diagnostic. And then how do you, because where I struggle the most,
yes.
I did multi-stakeholder approaches, right? When I created my organization, Terra dos Sonhos, which works with emotional health, and to, the goal of my organization was to bring emotional health to the table at the same level as clinical health. And I had to talk to a lot of stakeholders,
Yes.
hospitals, government, companies, patients, families, children, so a lot of them. And building a common vision or a common goal or a common outcome, because when you have a system, you need to have a common outcome in order to design a system change process, right? How do you get to that common vision?
I think what these changes slightly when we're talking from a systemic perspective, because it's not just a common outcome. What is important, what it needs to happen when you're doing this kind of diagnosis or problem analysis, is that the picture of your problem is built collectively.
Okay.
So that means that actually, first of all, you are really putting on the pieces of what real world is about in terms of your problem. So we are avoiding the bias of approaching a problem, as we were saying at the beginning, from our sectoral or institutional perspective. So we are really having a more rich picture of what we are dealing with, and we are understanding collectively what are the dynamics. So the first outcome you need to look forward is to actually, by working all together, you are going to actually to understand what are the key elements, what are the blockages, what is happening with your problem, what is blocking your problem, what are the really priorities and more important things you will need to tackle in order to solve the problem. So the common perspective, the common goal, it really builds up intuitively and naturally in the process.
Okay.
But even more other things come into the first line. As I say, it is conflict. It is not a very easy moment of the whole management process of system change. But at the same time, it's about recognizing that problem is actually a responsibility of all the parties here. Therefore, we need to tackle and to work together. That's what you need to plan for and expect and to happen in that moment.
Okay, so what you're saying is actually the key element is to bring everyone together at the diagnosis part, because
that's
then
a key.
the product of the findings is common.
Absolutely.
So you will have
It's
less
common.
resistance.
Yeah, totally.
And then you will
have
agree.
Absolutely, and more even gains.
Another thing we talked a lot about when we prepared this webinar, we had very good conversations.
Yes, we did.
For hours.
Yes.
And we talked a lot about how the context is important to system thinking, system change, and how that relates to scalability, because we social entrepreneurs are always obsessed.
Yes, we are all.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
right?
know, I'm a practitioner as well.
We're all obsessed to, changing the world in a fast way, and we're really, eager to put our solution at its best in order to scale it. If a system change is context dependent, how does scalability fit here? What's your concept of scalability?
Right. Okay. I think that assumption is a bit of a question. So I think what my particular view on this, from a systemic perspective, is not solutions that are not context dependent. So that's the main contribution that this framework brings. Because if we understand, that these systems have a particular behavior, so the question is, and here is the main question, if we are working towards sustainability, what sustainability means from a particular point of view. I know I'm going a step forward to come back to the point. So the contribution that my work and this framework can make to this field is that actually sustainability is that type of behavior, and that means that's a significant shift of our perception of sustainability, which is before it was more conceptual, but now actually we know what we have a final destination where to go. So that means that the system we're acting right now, probably we are acting because it hasn't got a sustainable behavior. So the point from a systemic perspective of what social change is about is what are the conditions I have to build, introduce in my system, in my context, to actually make the system to transit, to be transformed towards a more sustainable state. So the question is, how to do that in terms of scaling is precisely that. So you need to know what are the conditions that sustain in the system, sustain that your solution works out to replicate those conditions in different contexts. So for example, you have, let's say you have a solution like the microcredit, we discussed about that. So why the question we have to address ourselves is actually, okay, so this solution, work it out, why? What changes did that solution make in the system that actually made it more sustainable?
Talking about the microcredit.
Yeah, talking about the microcredit,
yeah.
or talking about any other solution.
Yeah.
So the question is not about replicating the strategy. The question is about what are the conditions I have now as entrepreneurs in my own system, and what are the conditions that solution is going to bring me. So what that solution builds up in my system. So there's what I actually know, if that is the solution I can scale up to my own situation, or can scale up to any context. So I'm not being very clear, but that's a relationship between context and system. It's not actually that it's the idea that we cannot cut and paste any solution because it works it out in a particular context.
We have
what
to
is
adapt
key
it.
is to know what is behind that, why that work it out, what are the system conditions that allow that solution to actually make a difference, and therefore any scalability has to go first for understanding what kind of system am I intervening. Are those conditions equal to the conditions where my solution, the one I'm trying to scale up, are they similar? So therefore, I can really plan about the scalability and the success of it.
I know this is a new area of research, so we have more questions still than answers.
Yes, we do.
But, and we warned everyone here that probably they would leave this room with more questions, but the thing is, it's better to have educated questions than having, nonsense questions. So, do you know of any example of well-succeeded system change that you can, talk us a bit about, or? I
mean, that's a very interesting question, because the question, I think that we have the pieces of what sustainability and system change is all about. I don't think we can talk about many solutions that will fit within the conceptual framework, because I think the conceptual framework it provides very much for explaining what it should be,
yep.
that actually what we've been developing and applying in the field. But I think, and I've been in the field for many years, I know the bits and pieces of what the collective solution we all need to come up with is all there. The question now, my suggestion is, let's keep exploring what system change means from this systemic perspective. Let's keep exploring how our systems work. Let's keep on advancing this research area. Let's keep on trying out what we think are the new tools and the new frameworks, and therefore we will come out to really make examples, practical examples that really fit more, what I could talk about more conceptually. But of course, I don't want to discredit any experiences because of not being systemic. Many of them, they are systemic. How many of them are really moving towards the particular type of behavior we are talking about? I think we couldn't be that clear. Yeah. Until very recently. I think we've been trying to look for sustainability in a very blank way, trying to see, okay, we're making a positive impact and contribution, but how much that contributes to the final goal. We didn't have a final goal, a final destination. Now we have. Yeah, but it's difficult to measure, right? How our project is contributing to sustainability as a whole. Yes. How can we measure that? I mean, it's really hard to think about practical tools that we can use to measure how we can, go towards something that it's not really defined, because sustainability, I can understand that we all understand that what sustainable behavior is intuitively. Yes. But we don't have a frame that we use all the same. So how can we measure the progress of our projects towards that sustainability? I think this is a question that, Yeah, everybody has in mind, isn't it? Yeah. I think my intake into that is to, first of all, recognize that we all doing transitions. Is everything about a process, isn't it? We are all trying to bring a particular context to, with the current conditions we have in that context, whatever it is, to a more sustainable context. So about measuring impact is about knowing First of all, what is the conditions, what sustainability is in terms of systems behavior. And this refers to the capacity, we heard many of these terms, capacity, adaptive capacity, resilience, and et cetera, et cetera. So there are certain conditions we know now theoretically, conceptually, and we are trying to advance. For example, my work is trying to advance into defining what are the conditions that a system present when we are talking about sustainability. So as we are talking, that we have the final destination. So measuring impact is about measuring how our systems are building up step by step towards that final state. And one key contribution in this topic is actually learning more about how to navigate these systems. Because we've been discussing it with our conversation, systems have different behaviors that we can see as by the climate, the dynamics of systems the equilibrium is dynamic. So as we are investing, acting in a context, the behavior of that context, of that system is going to be changing.
Yeah.
So it's about providing to the society the capacity to really understand how the changes work and what are the key elements that they need to be monitoring along these processes.
So let me see if I understand.
Okay,
let's try to
make a summary of what I did.
Let's try to take the education system, for instance, which I'm working on right now. So we all know somehow in education, and we all hear from parents, teachers, school directors, organizations, governments, everywhere, all around the globe, we hear education must change. Mm-hmm. So this would be the common, grounds in all the world is that education must change. Mm-hmm. And we have 2 or 3 things that we know we want to change. We want to teach more, so social and emotional skills. Uh-huh. We want them to be flexible and adaptive to circumstances because we're in a fast-changing world. So they need to be very flexible. They need to take initiative on their own. They need to know how to work together. And we all agree on that. That would be, our sustainability ideal behavior in education, right?
Uh-huh.
And then we have several initiatives and several ventures that do different approaches, and some work in different contexts in a different way from each other. That doesn't matter, just as long as they are all aligning with this more sustainable behavior. Is this what you've been saying?
I mean, that
as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, like we could take any topic, we could develop every topic from a systemic perspective largely. I mean, to give you a feedback on that, I think the key point of education is one of the elements of what make up a system, a social system, isn't it, or our society. So for education model to be sustainable from a system perspective, it has to be functional. So I'm probably not going to say anything new, but I'm going to underline what is the approach if I'm able to make it. So the first thing is, of course, to make it functional. So that's a first concept. Second concept, it has to be aligned. Alignment is very important. So that means any part of any system has to be aligned. Why? Because we are talking about collective entities. We are talking that these collective entities, which are systems, they are made up of the functioning of the parts, so in an emergent or higher level of action. So for the collective to work and to be sustainable, of course, the parts of it has to be sustainable. Now, for the education system to be sustainable, has to be properly aligned to the solving the problems of the collectively, solving the problems of making sense of what system has to be within the context of that society, etc. As you say, and of course, creating the capacity, the internal capacity to really actually allow the collectiveness, the system, to maintain, to remain sustainable, as you say, to be adaptive, to be open enough, to be capable to respond to what the changes in the environment and how to integrate. So basically what I'm talking is about any component of a system has to play these dual functions. It's called multifunctionality in systems or in complexity theory. This is the capacity to really provide for the sustainable functioning and performing of your own sector or ecosystem, which is education in this case, and also providing for being part and contributing positively in a sustainable way to the collectiveness of it. So that's why these two, we're talking about alignment, multifunctionality. So these are key points. And I think the important thing is to really be open, to really have that adaptability, to really be able to cope with the changes.
To transform itself, because it's a dynamic organism. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's more difficult for us to understand this or to talk about this because we are very used to a linear approach to things, and this is not linear. This is an organic approach, and
absolutely.
Yeah, and it makes it more difficult. So examples could help us out.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to try to give the case of my organization, Terra dos Sonhos. When I started trying to bring this subject of emotional health being as important as physical health for our health as a whole. The problems were basically that society has a bit of a problem when we talk about emotional problems because they identify emotions with, exposing some fragility. So it's not socially, very well accepted sometimes to talk too much about emotions, and people feel heavy to do that. And on the other hand, the health system focus much more on the clinical health than in the emotional health, and treating the body and not treating the soul and the mind. So what I decided to do then was to work with a specific target, which was children that were very sick with life-threatening diseases. And I tried to understand first how the system of the illness, the emotional and the physical illness worked in that child. And I think this was a system thinking approach.
Okay.
Because I thought that, we have a child that is very sick emotionally and physically. But when we talk about the emotional sickness, I think that more than the child, the parents, the grandparents and the ecosystem, the familiar ecosystem of the child is more sick emotionally than the child himself, especially if the child is younger, because the child has no sense of what death is, what finish is.
Surely.
So the anguish, and the depression associated with it, and also the many negative externalities a problem like this has, are much more in the rest of the family. So we have a whole system of sick people emotionally.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, sounds like.
So the thing, when I started designing the solution, I thought, what can I do? I have to focus on child. So I design experiences that bring them some positivity and make them see hope instead of sickness, make them see, a way of understanding the world in a more positive way instead of seeing barriers and obstacles all the way. But it wasn't enough to work with the child, so I started working with the families first. So I designed the experience, the emotional experiences, with the families. They were kind of working with me in designing an emotional, experience, a positive experience for the child. And when this happened, all the energy in the family changed, and eventually the child himself changed. So was this a systemic approach, a systemic change in a very little system, which is families? Or if I wanted to do more in a systemic change point of view, what could I do more than this?
Well, I think it sounds like you're doing a great job. How could I contribute to your case is, I think what is important, it comes to me, as you're explaining, is to realize that, part of the model of what you're trying to tackle, it relies on this system structure of being, what we call embeddedness, which is a principle common to any system, meaning that is these concentrical circles of entities, that they are the child at the core, the family around, the larger family environment around, the society, work environment, and everything around. So we have this concentric model, sometimes I call it onion. We talked about the onions before, you and me. So
peeling onions.
Peeling onions. System change is about peeling onions, isn't it? So what is important, and actually you have realized, is actually this is the way it works, actually, and these circles, they are connected. And you realize that actually, maybe because the kids are at the core of it, they are receiving all the pressure of the other ones, but actually by acting in other spheres of this concentric onion, in this concentric model, we can actually interfere. So I think what is important in your case is actually maybe spend some time about trying to understand better what are the dynamics in between the different levels of your model. So what and what flow that do they work, and what are the mechanisms, and where they so qualify more this relationship between the child, the family, and the outer layers of your models, and planning accordingly. So the moment you realize more about how these dynamics work, you can actually plan more accordingly about, you know, what kind of impact I want to, what kind of influence I want to bring to the system, therefore go with the flow.
So understanding all the impacts our solution has, it's key to understand how we can, you know, interfere with the system, is what you say.
I wouldn't say impact, I wouldn't say how does it work, what are the dynamics at play. So the impact is a different term. Impact is the outcome we are measuring, which is very related to our expectations. So we could go into a whole conversation about
Theory
impact
of change
assessment.
and everything, yeah.
But you know, what I'm talking about is understanding more the dynamics. Dynamics are the key important thing, because as you say before, we are talking about a model which is not linear anymore. And it's not because the model is non-linear. Our societies are more and more complex because the number of elements in our societies and the way they interplay is getting into a pattern of behavior which is complex. And not complex as an adjective, it's a particular type of behavior which is called in theory complexity dynamics. So it's all about understanding the dynamics and the structural system. So I've been talking about the structure with this concerted model. What is on your side to do maybe now is to really understand more about the dynamics.
Just to answer a question, Silvia, yes, when I say clinical health, I mean physical, yeah. So before we go to the questions from the participants, and we have, I think, around 20 minutes more.
Yes.
And we have some questions that we got before the webinar started. What could you say directly to these social entrepreneurs, to these social projects of, you know, concrete steps that they can do in their own projects in order to be more systemic on their approaches?
Well, in order to be more systemic, so I think the first thing I would say is to perceive the difference of what we're talking about. When we're talking about system change, any change in a system, it can be called system change. So make sure if you are talking about any change in a system or you are talking about which is sustainable change, which is a different way of, as we've been discussing today, is a particular type of behavior. Of course, we know. No one knows how this particular type of behavior or these systems are. We are getting there and we have many lies. So first thing, be clear with your language and with your terms. The more clear you are, the more service you're doing to yourself. Secondly, yes, as we are talking, so discover the dynamics. So whatever problem you are dealing with, whatever contribution you want to make, consider it that, you know, understand how that problem works. We talked before about diagnosis, you know, the mapping of the problems, understanding the relationship between the problems, and we talked before about bringing the partners, the different stakeholders that are responsible with your problem on the table. So you don't, actually that's the good news. When you do this in a participatory way, meaning in a multi-stakeholder approach, bringing the different stakeholders, actually that dynamic, how those dynamics work, you're going to have the answers on as you go through the exercise. So that will be the second point. Try to figure out, work on dynamics, see how dynamics
Don't forget
work.
about the rest, but it's curious about that I had a class not a long time ago where I did an exercise where I divided the class in groups and I created a scenario of a social lab.
Yes.
So each group was one of the agents and they were finding the causes of the problem together. And it was very funny because in the end, some of them, the feedback they gave was, "Oh, it was amazing. I never thought about the problem seen from that point of view."
Yeah,
and
there you go.
And it was really incredible how they made me understand their pain. And the pain points has a lot to do with the leverage points where blocks of the system, I'm
coming to that right now.
Okay, so What do you think?
Absolutely, yeah. So so that's key, because this is the reality we're facing right now. We're moving from models of operating where we are tackling problems from sectoral, what I call sectoral approaches, which are fragmented approaches to problem solving, moving towards systemic, more holistic approaches. So this is the point. Actually, first you have a lot of return and benefits when you work with strategies, because actually it builds up together. There's so much outputs that you can take, benefits that you take for these processes. But the key point, to move on forward, and that will be my final contribution in this question, it will be once you have this mapping analysis and you can understand when your stakeholders, how these problems, how these causes to the problem are related, what is behind it, what are the mechanisms, what is the historical trend, so looking at it as a process, as we've been talking today, then it will be more clear to you what is the strategy you need to build, because actually to solve the problem you will have the whole tree. As we look at the problem analysis like a tree of causes effect lines, you will have actually know what are the key points you need to leverage in order to solve the problem, and that must be the driving point of your agenda or your proposal. It's not about tackling one of the problems you are talking about. It's about unblocking the whole path that is showing to you in your analysis that it needs to be tackled in some way collectively, because you will probably see, and that's part of what you lived before, everybody's related to it. Everybody has a responsibility in most of the causes. So we're talking about collective agendas. You probably will, guys, have to be common accords, collective agendas, how to prioritize and tackle this point. But avoid the former framework. So, okay, let's prioritize now.
Yeah.
Go with the flow. Go with whatever you need to move. This is, system change is like a chess game. The whole purpose is not about eating the pieces of your opponent, isn't it? It's about gaining the game.
Yeah.
So this is the same logic.
That's a very good analogy. So are sustainable development goals a way of helping us, work together collaboratively in a more, system change approach?
I think so, very much. What we're seeing today is again business as usual in how to tackle sustainable development goals, many country proposals, many sectoral proposals on what to do, but also we are seeing many examples of creating these collective agendas where the parts of this agenda are recognizing that these are common problems. We need to go for collective and common solutions.
So before we move into the questions from the participants, just one last request. Could you list some tools or theories that people, if they want to get more deeper into what system change and system thinking is, could you point out some tools
I
that
think
they can use?
To clarify theoretically, as you mentioned before, we are talking about a whole family. So I think language is a very important thing. You guys we are all talking about complexity theory. And complexity theory is a whole family of theories. What is important from a sustainability point of view, we're talking about dynamics, and there you can explore theories like complex dynamics adaptive systems, or complex adaptive systems dynamics, which is going to explain you about what are the mechanisms which are behind your the dynamics going on in your process, and then here you're going to find out more about emergence, how the process be at a higher level of collectiveness, which is emergence, another mechanisms which are behind, and this is kind of the little mechanisms that really are making these dynamics work in that particular way. Yeah. We're talking about network analysis, network theory to explore the structure. As systems have a particular structure. Where we are talking about sustainability, we are talking about a very harmonized, synchronized structure. How your structure works is a network theory. System dynamics, which come from the MIT, also a very popular practical theoretical framework that's going to tell you very practical approaches. Be careful about, because it's very much involved into organizational change, but also you can take from there many tools like the iceberg model and mapping, system mapping, etc. So these are kind of the main sources.
Thank you. We have a question there from Teresa. If we could share some names of organizations working with specialized work on systems change. Well, I know, well, United Nations are working system change, I think, in some way with the Sustainable Development Goals, but I worked in Ashoka. Ashoka is trying to work more and more with system change. In education, I know they are trying to create a weaving movement in education.
Yes, they are.
I've now got a mail from Ross Hall, which was in charge of Ashoka Europe in education. He just changed organizations, and he created a movement of Learning Alliance that people want to change the system in education. So it's another organization, and which called Life Learning Alliance.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have some more organizations that you're focusing on system change or system thinking.
I think many organizations are working in practice today in system thinking. The point is how they are approaching things. So I wouldn't really recommend anything in particular. Again, I think the important thing is about going there, exploring, as we talked today, how are they doing things. So I will encourage everybody to be more demanding and trying to separate and the trees from the forest, and actually not going for real system change experiences out there. But yeah, there are many good examples of, for example, I was in the classes this morning, and we have this MSc label for Marine Stewardship Council. So I would say, go for any experience or organization working in collective agendas. That will bring you very close to what system change is about.
Okay, so thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I hope it was helpful. For me, it was
I hope
a lot.
too. It's not easy to talk about system change and complexity theory. So I hope I try to be...
As the name itself says, right?
Yes,
complexity theory.
It is.
But I think it was very useful. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Now we have some questions from our participants.
Yes.
And I organized them in clusters.
Yes.
We have some general ones, which are really hard to answer.
Yes, there are.
But this one is a bit more objective. How can social entrepreneurs approach funders to fund systemic change?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think, like as I'm saying right now, so make your case. So stop talking about system change like empty word, and try to explain the dynamics and show your theory of change based on a logic, of what is the context, what are the dynamics going on in the context, what is your problem, the causes behind, how are they interrelated. Show in the practice, in your arguments, that you are using a different framework, a different approach to it. That would be the main
And do you think that another approach could be trying to understand how this problem, because they're agents and part of the system, understand how this problem affects them, and try to build a customized and more focused value proposition based on that?
Yeah, I think that we have a great argument to really leverage participation and engagement in our support to our project, because as systems, we are all part of the same thing.
Yeah.
We are on the same boat. So it depends what you're talking to and the relationship with the cause or the problem you are trying to tackle. The relationship is going to be more direct or indirect. But definitely, we are not talking about donors or external agents. We are part of the same thing. We all need to act accordingly. And as I'm talking all the time, this is about aligning agendas. So if you are approaching an institution, it's because they have a common interest on your topic. So let's make a value proposition where their part of the picture is aligned while you're part of the picture, and who other people needs to be in the picture, actually. Yep. So we got a framework to really leverage engagement in our courses.
Good. We have another question, which is, wow, how culture can be changed, and how long does it take on average?
Oh my God.
This is really hard to answer, but it's interesting. I mean, changing cultures, changing mentalities, changing paradigm. Actually, it's what we're trying to do with system change.
Absolutely, right? Fred, that's absolutely what I'm trying to do. I mean, what is culture? It's a collective manifestation of our individual and collective habits. So we are talking about culture equally in the same level of what is systemic change is at the collective level. And as we're talking, culture is made out of people, and systems are made out of people and agents. So how you change culture, as you say, is through processes of systemic change. through bringing new frameworks, new ways of understanding things, from moving from the reviewing the old paradigms and recognizes that our societies, because our systems are changing. So what we were doing before had sense before. What we need to do right now and what we'll need to do in the future, it will be different. We are living moments of very rapid change in our context. So we need to recognize that culture has to be also dynamic. So yeah, we're talking about process. We are talking about processes that take time, but is part of what it is.
And also iterative processes. You know, you give one step in front, and then you come back, and then you go forward, and then you come back. And the evolution is not stable and linear, right? So
absolutely,
it's very confusing, very frustrating sometimes, because sometimes we think that we see the vision and we can't. Someone is saying that it takes minimum 3 generations to change culture.
Yeah, there you go.
I would say so. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a really hard process. Maybe we could have some more specific questions.
Okay,
and we have some context specific, so it's a challenge because we didn't think about this context.
Yeah, we are talking about very generically about these things.
Yeah. So which are the most significant systemic changes in the employment area?
Oh, there you go. Now we're moving into the employment area.
Yeah.
Again, as we were talking in education, what can I say about employment? So again, we need to see same logic, same rational. Employment has to be at the services of the collective needs, isn't it? So what are the needs? What we need to see in the employment area is we need to see like anything that make part of systems, complex system, is we need to see adaptiveness, we need to see openness, we need to see diversity. Adaptiveness, why? Because again, we need to be able to respond to these changes of societies. We don't need to talk about what is happening in our lives around us, in our environments, in our economies, in our planetary issues, isn't it? So anything that makes part of our society, and employment one of them, has to be very, very responsive. So open.
Yeah.
Interacting with the context.
Yeah.
Capacity, institutional capacity to really adapt into these changes. I think that's very important. And diversity, I think what is important, very important to recognize that the number of elements within our system are changing, so diversity is a very important component of these systems. Why? Because we have to be able to do many different functions at the same time. We talked before about multifunctionality, which is the capacity to really act at a collective level, on an individual level, but diversity is one key element for survival. And more as we move toward more complex and more chaotic behaviors, because if we are not diverse in our individual capacities, in our ways to understand, in our tools to react, we are not going to survive. So we need to see all that.
Actually, I have some experience now working with junior achievement with companies, and how companies are recruiting and how they are developing their retaining policies, because they're struggling, you know, that the generation, the millennials, they stay 1 year in a job and then they go to another one because they want experiences. And those experiences can't be any kind of experiences. They want experiences with purpose, experiences where the organization and the culture of the organization values diversity. So this is changing the way companies are, you know, not only recruiting and retaining talent, but also operating in their own businesses.
Yeah.
And eventually, talking in a systemic way, this could influence the way universities prepare the students to go to the market. If the market itself starts asking for different, you know, skills and different attitudes from students getting out of the university. So it's really interesting to see how, departing from a concrete problem, we can get to a more system approach. Another one is regarding the fashion industry. Do you believe in systemic change in the fashion industry, meaning in elimination of the fast fashion business model, and how? Wow, this is another big question.
Again, I mean, I think we're hearing very much on the news about the fashion industry. And I think that's what it represents, is that we actually had that need, isn't it? And that's definitely the case, because they are operating under an old model, meaning that they are not taking care of what they're doing and how they're doing things. So yeah, definitely, system change has to come into fashion industry, and I think that's the case. There's a whole new movement, again, bringing together the different the different components of the value chains of the fashion industry to collectively tackle the different externalities and different negative impacts on the industry. So apparently it's happening, and I think the way they're tackling it is actually by accepting the responsibility, by assuming they need to tackle this together. So I think that systemic collective element is within these new actions. So, and it seems to be a big priority because we're hearing information about that the t-shirt is like 2,000 liters of water to produce it. So we are becoming more and more aware that the fashion model that we are consuming is absolutely unsustainable. As before, we weren't very unaware so far. So I think it's time for a change. So I really encourage any action to really.
I think there are some organizations already working on that. I know C&A Foundation and Tommy Hilfiger have been doing some really good job on this part of getting more sustainable.
Absolutely. I read even that the Prince Charles of England is also a person involved and devoted his image to the cause. So
nice,
a lot to leverage on that topic.
I say that I think we have 3 minutes. So I don't know if you want to do any more questions, because the other questions I have here from the participants, I think we've already mentioned them somehow. So if you don't have any more questions, I would ask Silvia for some final words and some final tips or advices to all these great social entrepreneurs on this network.
All right, okay, let me see what I can say at the end. Well, I say we're living times of change in these paradigms of how we tackle social change. And I think that the first thing I like to say, and I think I said before, is we have to be responsible. So we are very used to, in the social field, to have different waves of content that come in and out of our frameworks of work, and now system change is one of them. So the reason why I accepted the contributing participation today is to clarify actually what we're talking about. So I will encourage people to be responsible and to be proactive in searching for what this means and what is the contribution, and collaborating with institutions, with people who want to make a difference with this new framework, to try to do it in a professional way. That would be a call for responsibility. Apart from that, this is a new topic. It's very exciting. It's really new. It's full of great innovation. It's full of mind-blowing concept, and etc. So take it easy. It's not easy. Complexity is not easy. Good news is we can decode it. We can unravel it. So yeah, again, go explore, research, do your PhD, engage with institutions, but ask for quality. Go deep. Have good questions. We pointed out. Ask for your dynamics. How they analyze the problem. So actually, definitely, go and explore what complexity is about. And remember, complexity can be an adjective, and complexity also is a name. It's a kind of system behavior, and society, most of our contexts of working in the sustainability domain are already displaying this kind of behavior. So forget about, linear and the business as usual approach, and bring yourself into a new era, question yourself, why are we doing this? How can I think more holistically? What are these systems work? So go into the literature, there are good references about that, and learn more. We have to be very entrepreneurial in learning nowadays.
So social entrepreneurs have a fundamental part on this process, right?
Absolutely. I think that everyone has to is there to make a difference. So let's do it together, let's do it well.
Someone is saying that, Silvia, it's very difficult to abandon linear thinking. Systemic disciplines should be more known.
I know.
What can we do about this?
Listen, I've been researching on this topic for the last 13 years, and I can tell you when I started my PhD at the London School of Economics, my supervisors in the sustainability social chain department, they were trying to convince me that complexity was too complex to tackle. So I know in the last 2 years, it's just boom. And everybody's talking about it. That's why I'm saying, this is a call for responsibility. Let's not empty out the concept. I know it's difficult to forget and leave behind the old model, but guys, we know it's not working anymore.
Yeah,
we have a huge responsibility in our actions where we are out there to know that even if we are doing things with good intentions, are they really contributing to create that collectiveness that we need to.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to innovate. We need to try and ever, to experiment. But at the same time, yeah, we had to review our ways of operating, and we had to acknowledge that.
I think there are two ways which are very easy to implement. The first is universities bringing this more and more to their curriculum, and
absolutely.
So in order to make all these theories more accessible for everyone, this is one way. Another way is what you're doing, trying to develop, practical tools that entrepreneurs, more system entrepreneurs than social entrepreneurs, can use on the field to tackle all the complex things they have to deal with. I remember when we talked about it, you said, my first advice when you have this complexity of problems and context is don't panic.
Do not panic.
Do not panic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had to say, to be very honest, this is a very new field. In the field of complexity theory has been applied to many different domains of knowledge. Very few of the works we have published have applied sustainable complex thinking and what all that means to sustainability. So it's moving from other fields like physical, biological system, computational systems towards social sciences and social systems, but very little, and my work is one of the pioneers in applying these frameworks into how sustainability works, which is a particular type of behavior. So we had to be honest with ourselves and say, it takes time, but definitely we should be investing in research, we should be investing in experimenting in the practice. So we already have a lot of learning and knowledge about what we've been doing in the field of social change that we can actually apply to really sustain this new approach. And also, systemic change is multidisciplinary. We cannot just forget about the old theories and use these theories. System thinking is the framework. It gives us a structural base to really understand how things work. But the other theories still come to complement. I'm talking about psychological, I'm talking about social theories, sustainable theories. Any other theories help us to really understand. So we're talking about multidisciplinary collective work again to move forward this agenda.
Wow. It's a lot to take, right?
Yes.
It's a lot to take.
There we go. But we got to be busy. What are you going to be doing, isn't it?
Yes. And now I'm more and more enthusiastic about getting, a deeper knowledge on system change and system thinking.
Well done.
I've been thinking about this for a long time, and conversations like this really, make me more
and I'm
enthusiastic.
available to anyone. I'm really open, and that to really explore it more in the practice and innovate and and make errors together and rethink about it. So my idea is to really create a lab here in Lisbon where we can advance the frontier of knowledge and we can advance the frontier of practice and bring that dialogue together. So hopefully we can join forces with anyone listening and together here in Lisbon, and we can move on.
We're very lucky to have you in Lisbon.
Yeah,
and
thank
I
you.
hope that you visit Católica many times.
Okay, well, try to.
We had precious advices from Silvia. I think it's time to go because we have waits. So thank you for attending this webinar. Okay, the webinar evaluation. Please give your feedback. I hope it's good, and I hope to see you again all on a different and as rich as this one webinar.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Good afternoon.